Um, Thank you very much for the opportunity today to speak and to bring you up to speed in terms of what's transpiring at IOC. This is an exciting year for IOC. 70 years ago, our team at the Iron Ore Company of Canada hammered in a golden spike, marking the completion of the rail line between Schefferville in Quebec and our operations down in Sept-Îles. We shipped our first ore later that year and opened our current mine in 1962 right here in Lab West. We've had a very eventful past, many successes, and to say the least, we've had some challenges as well. But 70 years in operations this year, that is something to celebrate, and not many mining companies in Canada can actually say that. Through that, and through the recent time, I'm proud to say that we have 4 impact and benefit agreements with 5 Indigenous communities, and these relationships are core and integral to our success at IOC. From stewardship of the land to traditional knowledge and ways of knowing, we are learning every day from our Indigenous partners and finding better ways to provide the materials the world needs. And in spirit of true reconciliation, it's not just speak for us, we are taking action. In 2023, we saw the highest Indigenous spend to date at IOC at $80 million for last year. Last summer, IOC unveiled a new water truck in honor of National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. This truck is orange and is illustrated with "Every Child Matters." It will be in operation on our site and will continue to remind our employees as well as our contractors of the importance of this day. IOC continues and has been a significant economic driver in Newfoundland and Labrador. Not only are we the second largest industrial employer within the province for direct and indirect and induced employment, we have an equivalent of 4,630 full-time jobs right here in this province. We also, and we spoke about it yesterday a bit in terms of what these future projects coming online are in terms of GDP for the province. But as we speak today, IOC contributes approximately $715 million in regards to GDP, $303 million in provincial taxes, and $95 million in corporate taxes. As you can see with these numbers, we're a significant contributor to the well-being of the province. These numbers are really good, but they can even get better. But to continue to grow, we need to work together to ensure this region is in a place where people can live comfortably and securely, and businesses have what they need to thrive. That includes improving services like healthcare, housing, childcare, and increasing access to clean and affordable energy. Understanding the value of this region is crucial to our collective and future success, and we have advocated for the recognition of high-grade low impurity iron ore as a critical mineral here in Canada. This past fall, Minister Parsons announced that the provincial government would include this grade of iron ore as critical mineral strategy. And the province of Quebec follows suit very shortly afterwards. That was a big win for IOC and a big win for Labrador West. We need the federal government to follow the lead of the provinces and recognize high-grade iron ore as a critical mineral, unlocking significant opportunity for the peoples of Newfoundland and Labrador. And just recently, myself with my colleagues at QIO, as well as ArcelorMittal, have sent a letter directly into the federal government outlining the requirements that we see for that becoming a critical mineral. Teamwork and collaboration is critical. Together, with our partners, we have a plan to decarbonize and produce one of the lowest carbon intensity, high-grade iron ore products in the world. Yesterday, alongside Premier Andrew Furey and the Member of Parliament, Yvonne Jones, we announced several projects at IOC that will directly reduce the amount of carbon emitted here in the region. Again, by availing of the federal government's low carbon economy fund, IOC is reducing fuel consumption, creating new jobs, and reducing greenhouse emissions. By electrifying a portion of our heavy fuel boilers and using boiler use and implementing efficiency measures to our induration machines, we are reducing significant amounts of heavy fuel oil in the iron ore making process. This project, as mentioned yesterday, will reduce approximately 9% of our greenhouse gas emissions. And to put this into context, this is equivalent to about 18,000 cars on an annual basis coming off our roads. High-grade iron ore is scarce, but found in abundance in Labrador, in the Labrador Trough. And that's important because this type of ore is what's required to make green steel, steel made without the use of fossil fuels. The best quality iron ore pellets that IOC produces have the potential to reduce the carbon intensity of each ton of steel by more than 2/3 with current smelting and furnace technologies, because they require much less energy to refine at each stage of the steel making process. However, with future technologies such as hydrogen conversion, net zero steel is within reach with the iron ore products produced from Labrador. The demand for green steel unlocks a massive untapped market. Newfoundland and Labrador, specifically here, right here in the Labrador Trough, is host to some of the highest grade iron ore products around the world. A product forecasted to be in high demand as steel producers look for clean alternatives. Our customer needs are changing and the global demand for steel is quickly increasing. Approximately 70% of steel globally is made with the use of coal, resulting in highly emission-intensive production processes that account for 8% of the world's total GHG emissions. Collectively, to realize our potential, we need to work together. Partnerships with all levels of government and partnerships with Indigenous communities are crucial. Together, we can develop the green industries of tomorrow right here in the Labrador West. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, for those words. I'd like now to ask Jennifer Williams, the President and CEO of Hydro Newfoundland, to come up and give a few words.
Mike, that was really short. He set the standard, I think, for what we all should be doing here today. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having Walter and I. have my colleague Walter Parsons here with me, and he'll be on a panel after I talk with some other folks. So certainly you can ask all your questions to him after. So I do feel more and more welcome. I was here at Minex before, and it's a tiny room. I don't know what you're going to do because you might have to go to a bigger room at some point, because this is a pretty impressive group of people that are here, both people speaking, but as well as just the representation from certainly the region, but across the province as well. It's obviously very an interesting place to come, and I know I feel more and more welcome every time I come. Talking a little bit about the spirit of optimism. I think it's been touched on this morning. I'm sure the drinks last night added to the spirit of optimism, but it was so fun just to be there and to see the camaraderie and people talking with each other and working together. Yeah, it's quite the momentum, and it's a really fun place to be. Shout out to NTV. I still think there should be like a places to go with Sharon Snow in some of these parts of the province, because people just do not understand. I think all us townies do not understand what's going on outside St. John's. It just needs to be profiled so much more. So glad that the news is here. So this is, I guess, why we're here. I mean, Minister Parsons mentioned it. There's optimism and that there's challenges, but the opportunities that are here in this jurisdiction are really unmatched. I'm not going to welcome and acknowledge all of the leaders that are here, but I certainly will mention a few. My minister, I would be in trouble if I didn't acknowledge Minister Parsons. We work very closely together, our teams. I don't know if Yvonne Jones, if MP Jones is here today. I know I saw her last night. Obviously, MHA Brown, I think you're over there with the lights. I think the Grand Chief Internation is here as well. And obviously, we've got some representatives, our IBA partners, and certainly we've got some representatives here of NCC. So welcome to all of you. Okay, please, the next slide. So our land acknowledgement is quite short, but it was done in consultation with Indigenous groups. So I will read this out, even though there was one done earlier today. Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro operates on traditional lands of Indigenous peoples in Newfoundland and Labrador. Next slide, please. So I'm trying to do this more often when I talk with people, say at the very beginning, what I hope you take away today, and then bookend it at the end, because it can get kind of lost in everything that we all sort of up here talk at you about. I'm really hoping that you take away that the shift to clean energy is underway. There are challenges. We have many decisions to make. Some of the folks in the room know that we've been working on those decisions for several years together now. We're not going to make them all at once, but we must start ASAP. And we are working to help power economic development, which is abundantly clear to a lot of the folks here, certainly here, but across the province as well. So this is something that I want to be really clear about. This province is already highly decarbonized. And it's something that not every jurisdiction across the country gets to put up on a slide like this. That's just for the domestic customers. If you were to add in the power that we sell outside of the province that is produced here in this province, it would be just under 99%. So it's pretty impressive. So this is something we should all be incredibly proud of. Everyone should be repeating this to everybody that you know, because you do get a lot of myths perpetuated. Holyrood is not shut down, and we shouldn't do anything on electrification because of that dirty oil at Holyrood. This is our reality. This is our reality. It's a 93% renewable grid that we currently have. So I want to make sure that that's really well understood. And that's 2 years in a row now. Materially benefiting from, as well from an island perspective, and therefore the ability to offset Holyrood is what's coming down over the Labrador Island Link. Don't believe everything they always hear. It works. It's working quite well. There's challenges in the early years. Anybody who's ever done a big facility knows there's always challenges in the early years, but it's really performing a good function for us. I'll also say this also includes, obviously, the remote communities that we have diesel power as well. Next slide, please. So this is just to help everyone understand a little bit about what we do supply, the Labrador interconnected system, the rural and isolated systems, and this is really a bit of a regulatory piece. This is how these various customers are classed with us. Island interconnected system. And I want to make one quick point here. That is close to 300,000 customers. And even though we don't direct bill to a lot of the customers, if there's any folks from that are served by Newfoundland Power here, we very much feel that everybody who is served by Newfoundland Power as well are our customers. If we don't do a good job on supply, all those customers are impacted. So we very much feel that. Obviously, our industrial customers are incredibly important to us as well. And you'll see they're beyond our borders. This is where we're selling. Any Bruins fans here? Beyond me? Oh, come on, one. Okay, there's got to be more. Anybody going to a game in Boston? We do supply power as far as that away. So, I mean, it's pretty neat to think that, we go well beyond our borders here. So that's just a very, next slide, please. I'm looking in this direction if it's happening over here. Is it happening over behind this screen? Okay, good. So I was wondering, where's the magic happening? Okay. So that's just a very quick overview of who we supply. And we think about your reliability 24/7, like truly, like the texts that go around with various text groups between our team. It would be interesting to, nobody tip that, please. Don't anybody tip that. We are very operational. I'm very operational. I grew up through operations. We care about reliability a lot, but we're very much looking ahead to the planning as well. And when I say our energy future here, I truly mean it. It's us together. And we keep hearing that word that it could almost be the theme of the summit, summit together, because everyone keeps saying it, because this is not getting done in silos. And the more that we think about how can we help each other move past some of the hurdles that we have, we can indeed advance the energy future that we need. So what to expect? In our industry, 2035 is tomorrow. A decision that we make today, or that we're talking about today, and I want to be really careful, nobody should panic about that 10 years necessarily. some of the folks in the room, we've been talking for several years about what's possible and where we should head. So when you think about that kind of time frame, if you think about, I'm just going to show up today and ask for a certain amount of power and then I'll be able to get it just a few years later, it does take a lot more time than that. Some of the decisions that we're talking about are huge decisions. They have to be made very thoughtfully and carefully and very iteratively, because somebody might come and say, this is the idea that we have and it's this broad. And then you have to iterate with various proponents. Well, then we go away and we say, well, what does that look like? And we come back, that's what this looks like. Oh, okay, maybe that's not exactly what we're looking for. Let's reiterate that again. So these decisions to get to that point really do take a lot of time. We've got really big decisions to make. We have to respond to growth while we take care of reliability as well. I'm sure nobody here who wants to have us going out and just sort of really super focusing on growing the system and then keep dropping our eye, keeping our eye off the ball. I'm not losing that metaphor there, and just losing the ball in reliability. We can't be doing that. This year, so provincially, we're filing a new study that will really lay out what is going to be the next big resource in the province, and that'll be coming in the spring. Some folks have been hearing us talk about that for a while. Muskrat Falls was basically a replacement for Holyrood. And there was always going to have to be another resource. It wasn't like Muskrat Falls and we're done for the next 30 years. There was always going to have to be another resource beyond that. The thing is, with electrification and industrial opportunities, that time frame is a lot closer than what it was. And we're talking sanction, what, 10, 12 years ago? So, a lot has changed in the last couple of years, let alone 10 or 12 years ago. So we are going to have to put in some new supply solutions for across the province very soon. These are huge decisions. We have to work very closely with government on what that means for customers in the province. So we will be coming out with some important information in this spring. So you'll hear a lot of coverage on that. This is all going to be done very publicly and transparently. You've heard me say that as well in many of these forums. Our intention is to file everything in front of the Public Utilities Board, which is a lot of information. Anybody, I know Jordan Brown reads everything that goes to the regulator. If anybody's paying a lot of attention, there is hundreds and thousands of pages of documents that go to the regulator. And it's really important that we have that very publicly available to be tested by folks who really can interact with those and know what it means. So all of that is being done in front of the regulator, and we'll have a lot of information, and you'll hear a lot about that in the media, I would expect, in the spring. Is it going to be easy when we come out and say, we need this resource, maybe two resources, we need some wind, those sorts of things? Is it going to be easy for folks to understand and get behind? Not necessarily, but we know that, and we have to do everything we can to help the public understand why this is. And I think, you don't always choose the easy path to do things. You do hard things because you can, and I know that this province can certainly do hard things. So we expect that we will be having a lot of public debate over what is the next appropriate resource to be added to this province in the coming months, and probably a year or two. So this is where this jurisdiction is blessed, certainly in Labrador, but on the island as well, with tried and true technologies. Hydroelectricity, it's abundant. If you look at some other jurisdictions in Canada, they're not as lucky to have those kinds of solutions, especially when you add on decarbonizing the electricity sector. Some folks just don't have as much access to firm power like hydroelectricity is, but we do have access to that. Certainly in Labrador, several projects that could proceed if they're the right ones to proceed with, on the island as well. So there's hydroelectricity projects. We can upgrade existing projects as well and get more out of the assets that we already have. That includes transmission lines, but it certainly includes the generation sources. One of the things that we haven't done much of yet, but you see being done in a lot of other jurisdictions, is new technologies. And that's okay, because we haven't needed those before. Because somebody might say, well, why didn't we have a ton of wind? We had an abundance of electricity as is. It's now that we're needing more solutions that we have to look at additional technologies and what ones make sense. So you can see here on the screen, we have wind. Hydrogen might indeed be a part of our electricity system in the coming few years. Batteries, solar, there's actually a couple of spots in the province. You might be able to do a little bit of solar. And demand management is an area that you see as well in other jurisdictions. And we're pretty small total megawatts, and our system is actually fairly flat as is. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be implementing things like demand management as well. Gives customers more control of what their electricity bill looks like. One of the most important parts, though, here is the reliable backup. Again, I think it's quite a savvy group here, so folks would understand the wind doesn't always blow. It feels like it always does. I was going into the function last night and I was like, the snow is falling straight down. I was like, I'm not really used to this. It's usually blowing sideways at home. So wind doesn't always blow. And so you have to have that firm power backup. And sometimes that can be a bit offensive when we're thinking about a decarbonized electricity sector, that you want to use some fossil fuel-based systems, but there's rules that the federal government is contemplating that acknowledge that we can have fossil fuel-based systems in a limited fashion for the longer term. And any decisions that Hydro would take that could contemplate the continued utilization of some of those will always honor regulations that would factor that in. However, the other thing that we're seeing, starting with Brea and other jurisdictions as well, is renewable fuels. So we're considering how could we use renewable fuels in existing combustion turbine systems or future combustion turbine systems that we could potentially add. So there's a lot of new technologies that are coming, but we're blessed with tried and true technologies. We're not having to experiment a whole lot, and I think that's wonderful. So next slide, please. So, and you can go on to the next one if you don't mind. Thank you. So as part of us going forward this spring with what the next resources should be, we did what's called a digital engagement. So some of the folks in the room who do sort of stakeholder engagement or, trying to reach out and get the opinions of the public. So we went out and tried to, as much as possible, get the public to respond to their opinions on the electricity sector. And we certainly had people from Labrador respond to us and what's important to them. So here's a few of the pieces of, response that we had from the folks who responded from Labrador. Reliable service, minimize the impact of maintenance outages. I'll talk for just a moment about that. Invest in reliable systems, minimize the impact of extreme weather, implement clean energy solutions, take climate action, love it. Ensure the system can support growth and electrification, and test and implement new technologies. This is what we heard from the customers here in Labrador. So we can just pop to the next slide, please. So here are some of the things on the system growth. So I have a slide on system growth and a slide on system reliability. So on the clean energy side, what you probably see here, again, is we have mentioned them, and some of them are longer term options, but you can do upgrades at Churchill Falls. And I think I've talked about that here before, and it's getting some momentum in the public. You can upgrade the existing units at at Churchill Falls, and you can add a second powerhouse at Churchill Falls. So that's really neat for us to be able to possibly do that. Obviously, Gull Island is another option that would be available. In the remote communities, we're working to try to minimize the diesel production in those communities. I kind of say it this way: we'd love to work ourselves out of a job and just be firm power and have the communities be the owner of, for example, renewable solutions that would go into these towns and communities. So that would be the ultimate outcome that we would envision. So we really want to get clean energy into remote communities as well as the much larger systems. Obviously, electrification, I won't talk a whole lot about that here because the industrial partners here are talking about what they want to do. And also, Labrador is highly electrified anyway, except for vehicles. Anybody here driving electric? Few, not you. I'm talking about folks from Labrador. So we've got a few folks from Labrador. We actually have how many electric vehicles in Churchill Falls? 8 now. So if anybody wants any advice on how do they work, and I know, again, there's another few folks. I know Black Lab has electric for the last year or so, but Churchill Falls, we've had a number of vehicles for quite some time. I think the first one was probably 5 or 6 years old, if not longer. So we've had a good bit of experience. So they do work. I actually had somebody in a room with me a couple of weeks ago from Ontario or somewhere in the States. And anyway, they said, yeah, but they don't work in the cold climates. I'm like, really? Is that what you actually think? So it is a myth that they can't work. They can work. Obviously, you have to plan your day a little differently than you would if you were driving something that's fossil fuel fired, but they absolutely work. So electrification and that coming into people's personal lives in Labrador is also going to be an impact on the system here. Network additions. So this is where, and it might come up a little bit on the panel with Walter and the folks after, is for the last several years, we've been working with various proponents about how do we get more power to this area. And you know that there's a restriction on the addition of anything of any size in the area, but we need to get big power here and big power. And that takes iterative work with the various proponents. And as Minister Parsons said today, there's a really important next step for us that will be happening in the coming months, where we're going to be working directly with the proponents to do the final stage of the studies to see, okay, now that we've narrowed it from these ideas down to this, what does that actually cost? And then once it will be agreeable, hopefully, to the various proponents, then we can actually get going on constructing something. So on the network additions perspective, and we had to, we call it network additions because that's how we started calling it at the Public Utilities Board. So that is really making some really great progress lately. And then the last piece is the collaboration. Again, we're working really closely with as many proponents as possible to put the input into the decisions that we have to make. Okay, next slide, please. So on the system reliability, and I know that you all would talk about this a lot. One of the things that's got to be the most frustrating for both the commercial and the industrial folks, as well as the residential folks, is the outages that you have on a planned basis every single year to do maintenance. We know it's frustrating. MHA Brown has talked to us about it. We certainly hear it from customers as well. We're going to do everything we can to continue to minimize those. So hopefully it'll be incrementally better for you this year. And perhaps as we start to advance a much larger system here, there might be solutions that we could implement to make those situations a lot less. The base rates in Labrador are very low, and you would know that's some of the lowest in the world. I'm not at all suggesting that when you get your bill that it's not meaningful, certainly to the industrial customers or to the residential customers. But the system that you're paying for now in your rates was to recover only a very small portion of what's constructed, and what comes next, could increase rates. Certainly will for the industrial customers that might want to do the network additions. They will bear most of that cost, but rates are very, very low, and it's going to have to be something that we work with the public on and help you understand how do we add new aspects to the system and manage rates alongside you. Extreme weather. We had a couple of situations, I think it was happened last year at Churchill, that we hadn't seen in, I don't know, since the 90s, or maybe it was ever, I can't remember the stat, where the ice storm that affected the lines to Quebec took those lines out. And this is where the electrical engineers are a lot better than me. I did civil, so I'm just pretending a little bit to be electrical sometimes. It caused basically a protection and domino effect back into Labrador. And that risk is going to exist more and more as we see more and more of these ice storms and more of these extreme weather pieces. So we've got to really keep an eye on how do we manage those go forward, because they're not going to get less. Is there anybody who believes that there's not going to be an impact? I think everyone is finally at the place that we believe climate change is real. Next slide, please. So there's so much so much opportunity, not just in our industry, but also across yours. They require power. We mentioned that already. And the people and the leaders, with the partners, with the vision and the strategy, these things are going to take us some time. I was chatting with some folks earlier at breakfast about environmental assessments. I will touch on this really quick. One of the things I've been talking about at various speaking engagements lately is I contrast two projects. And I talk about Churchill Falls, which was, I think, first started construction in 1967 and first power in 1971. So about a 5-year period for a 5,400 megawatt plant. Now, 5,400 megawatts wasn't online on day one. And I'm confident there was no consultation. There was no environmental, well, I shouldn't say no environmental protection, but very minimal. Safety practices probably were minimal to non-existent. A very different world, but it got done fast, right? But a very, very different world. Over time, appropriately, we have added in a lot of processes to deal with the things that we should. Consultation, environmental protection, safety standards, regulatory, public approvals, just stakeholder engagement. And when I think about how much innovation is on the technology side, we've got loads of technologies. Anybody who follows the energy industry, there's almost too many. There's almost too many technologies now to choose from. It's like if you go to a buffet and there's 30 things, you want to taste it all, but you can't and you shouldn't, right? You really should just be having a few things that make sense for your jurisdiction. But where there hasn't been a ton of innovation, and there's a risk here to getting power done, is on all of those approvals processes. We've added them, but we haven't really said, how can we maintain the integrity of the need for this, but shrink it? And I was having a really neat conversation earlier with some folks who do environmental assessments. And, it sounded to me like innovation in the way we can do environmental assessments. It still protects the outcome, but just does it a little differently. If you can shave off a couple of months on what would have been a 1.5-year process, those things are incredibly meaningful. They're meaningful from having access to the power, but they're meaningful from the cost of the projects too. For every year you delay a project, that project just gets more and more and more expensive. So we really do have to, and I think there's probably a lot of folks in this room who can think about, number one, what is your role in how we get all of those various steps in the process and the approvals? How can you help shrink that while protecting the integrity of the outcome? And also talk about that risk, because it's a really, really big risk. We've got tons of solutions here. We've got solutions that are available at our fingertips. We can import solutions, batteries, and those kinds of things. But getting them done is the big challenge. The other piece about that, which I'm probably stating the obvious to some in the room, is everywhere's electrifying now, right? And so from a supply chain perspective, if we are 3 or 4 years before we make our first decision on what to build, get in line, right? If you want to remember when people couldn't get cars during the pandemic, you had to wait for your delivery. That's the way it's going to be for transformers. That's the way it's going to be for turbines. So again, add in where's the innovation in the processes. If we take too long, if we don't try to innovate there and try to be out ahead of it, we're going to be at the back of the line, and it's going to take us even longer. Therefore, the cost goes up. I sound like a doom and gloom. I don't mean to be. So anyway, I should try to bring it up a little bit because I feel like I've just brought you all down. A bit of minutes present. The opportunities are unbelievable. The industries, I love this industry, but the industries that you're involved in, I really do think this is such a bit of a secret, what is going on here in mining in the province generally, but certainly in Lab West. It is really, truly inspirational. I'm trying to convince my daughters to come up and work here. They are both doing engineering. And I was like, you should go work in Labrador. Number one is I think that the island, people on the island, the townies don't think that much about Labrador, and it is terrible. There's so much to learn about Labrador and to contribute to the province that we have to have more people really understand what goes on here and the benefit of it. So here's the key takeaways. The shift to clean energy continues. There are challenges. I've spoken about some of those. We do have a lot of decisions to make as we move toward that energy future, and we can work together to power economic development in Labrador. That's it for me, folks. Thanks for listening.
All right, thank you very much, Jennifer. I'd like the first panel, and this is the part of the day that I really truly enjoy, is having a bit of a conversation amongst some of our leaders. So I'd like to have Mike McCann, Joe Broking, Joel Crepeau, and Walter Parsons come on up here now, and we'll have a little bit of a question period. So everybody here is familiar with our three mining friends, but I would like to introduce Walter Parsons. He's the VP of Transmission Interconnections and Business Development with Hydro Newfoundland. So I'm going to start on the far end, and we'll work our way this way on this first question, and we'll have each of you give a little bit of a comment. So with environmental, social, and governance, and the world's focus on decarbonization, how do you, as industry leaders, think we need to achieve this decarbonization? What are some of the things we need to do here?
Um, well, that's what we're trying to do, and what the message we tried to convey this morning in regards to how we approach the CAMI project is, I mean, we invested 2 years into getting to know the project better, and we are publishing something in the next few weeks, and it's not going to be a final. It's not going to be what's going to happen. It's more the stage at what we are right now, and we've been spending the last years, especially with Michelle, developing partnerships and relationships, and we're going to be, I think that what we're going to present is just another way to accelerate those discussions. So it's really for us, the way of doing things in the future is really establishing relationships and trying to realize projects with everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joel. Yeah, I think, listen, from an ESG, that's a very broad question.
I know.
By the
yeah,
way,
yeah.
but
One aspect.
yeah, I'll try and take this on as fulsome as I can. From an environmental perspective, when we talk about the Labrador West region, I think it's pretty clear how we can improve things from an environmental perspective. And we're talking about this. You heard Jennifer talk about this. You heard Mike talk about it. You've heard Joel talk about it. But specific to our operation, we're focused on reducing fossil fuel consumption, and we want to be the green miner of choice, just like our peers at this table. So I think from an environmental perspective, to get quite specific, we're focused on diesel fuel consumption and bunker C, or heavy diesel number 6 fuel. Those are areas where we can significantly improve. We have targets. Specifically for next year, we want to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 2.8%. And then from there, we want to eliminate our greenhouse gas emissions, which we think is doable specifically in this part of the world. From a social and governance perspective, it's critical from a Tecora perspective that we continue to improve. We continue to collaborate with all the stakeholders in the region. That's something, we're a new company, so we're still continuing to evolve here. But certainly from our perspective, when we think about mining in the future, and this isn't just lip service from a Tecora perspective, we want to involve all the stakeholders in the region in a collaborative way to do the right types of development at the right time. We think that's important from an ESG perspective. One thing I failed to mention earlier, inclusivity at Tecora is very, very important to us. And we are proud of the fact that today, our workforce is comprised of 27% female. 27% females, and that's a number that we want to increase. The average is 16%. So we're very proud of that, and that's something that we're going to continue to increase. It's another way we think about inclusivity in ESG.
Thank you. Mike?
From an IOC perspective, I think it was mentioned earlier, we may have operations in Labrador West, but we're actually a global player. And climate change is a global phenomenon. It's not centered around Labrador West. So we look at it through two lenses. One is, what can we do internal to our operations, be it scope 1 and scope 2. And then I'll speak a little bit about scope 3, which is with our customers. So within scope 1 and 2, 70% of our emissions come from our pelletizing plant. So we're spending right now $18 million on an R&D project to replace our bunker C burners with electric burners. And that project's going on right now. Also, a third of that 70% comes from the utilization of coke in our pelletizing process. And we're working now as well, looking at using a biochar. And we're doing that through some research within Quebec and replacing that for coke. So that's progressing well. And last but not least, in our back pocket, in case the plasma burners don't quite work, is how do we get into a biofuel for utilizing in our induration machine. So that's really important to us. From a Rio Tinto perspective, we're looking at our haul truck fleet. We're looking at electrification of our locomotives on our rail line. So we're looking at it very holistically within the region here. But what's even a bigger bang for the buck in terms of reducing carbon emissions globally is how can we get our products and make more DRI products that go into steelmaking? Because we can have a significant impact. When you start thinking about 8% of the global emissions are coming from steelmaking, just give you an example, 1% comes from all the aircraft flying around the world. 8% comes from making steel. And if we can get our products into a position and working with our customers to, first of all, get them outside of coking, getting into natural gas, significant reduction. And if we get into the hydrogen space, we get down to net zero. We're actually selling 2 million tons of our pellets to a startup company called H2GS out of Sweden. And they're building the first commercially large scale hydrogen steel plant globally. So pretty excited about that.
I think from the perspective of hydro, I mean, we're hearing a lot that, you know, there has to be a greater switch towards electrification, obviously to decarbonize industrial processes. There's always efficiencies that can be found, and we can use somewhat less energy in some areas, but there'll always be a huge need for energy in this region and in these big industrial processes. So really, we're talking about making the switch, you know, as these guys have talked about, from fossil fuel based to electric based. So one of the things that we can do as hydro, I mean, we are a Crown Corp, so, you know, sure, we want to make a profit and return it to the people of the province, but we've got a bigger mandate than that. We need to enable economic development as well. That is part of who Hydro is. We're as a company that we all own. And so it's going to be incumbent on us to make it possible to move more of our renewable resources from where they're at to this region. So obviously transmission is key. The transmission lines, the 2 lines to Churchill Falls are completely full, as Jennifer talked about just now. And we need to find ways to expand that. We still have some generation left in reserve at Churchill Falls for Labrador, but it's also running short. And so we also have to add additional electrical supply. So, you know, working together to get this last stage of study that we're talking about now, to finalize that so we can get in the field on new transmission is key. And then, of course, as Jennifer mentioned, we have the ability to add capacity at Churchill Falls. Churchill Falls is obviously a gem in the world. You know, it is part of the reason why there is iron ore mining here. You know, iron ore is extremely common mineral. Yes, it's high quality here, but it's what makes this region what it is the resources here, the power is here, and the rail connections are here, and the port is not that far from here. So it all came together at the right time, and now I believe it's coming together again, but there is a need to expand that power infrastructure, and we have plans to be able to do that. We just need to work together to take those investments to push it to that step.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Again, my family's been in mining for 5 generations. My son is here as a supervisor working for you, Mike, and your roles have changed drastically. When I was a very young man, when my father was working here, the CEO of the company worried about 2 things: how many tons you made and how many dollars you made. And now we're here talking about decarbonization, and we're talking about socioeconomic impacts of your communities. We're talking about Indigenous IBAs and that. And I'll be curious to ask, as you're, and I'm going to be gentle with this, you're getting to be older gentlemen, and you probably have felt that change in your role or observe that as you come up through your careers. How does that change? How does that look like to you now when you have so many things you have to worry about more than just making tons and making money? And we'll start on this end.
Give me the hard question right off. Yeah, it's definitely transition in terms of our role. Is it important still to make sure everybody goes to work, comes home safely, you produce and you do things in a cost-effective way? Yes, because we're competing against a global marketplace. But you know, I think the maturity of society and the demands of society and what is required of large organizations now, rightly so, have advanced to where it's important to have great relationships with our Indigenous partners. We are actually mining ore from their traditional lands. We have a right to consult, engage, and work with our partners in that respect. We have a social license that we have to hold. Everybody in this room has to hold us as big companies socially responsible. We are a guest here, and we're actually mining a resource from the province, from our Indigenous traditional lands, and we're a caretaker of the resource to do it in a socially responsible manner. So it's critical and key for us to keep that top of mind, because losing our social license, we don't have an operation. And society holds the key to the social license. So for us to ensure as a CEO that we have a vibrant operation, yes, we got to take care of, call it the basics around safety, quality, cost, and production. But it's more so of a task nowadays within the Community Lab West, within a province, within a country, and actually on a global stage now. If you have a tailings dam failure, be it anywhere in the world, you could be out of business quite quickly. You've destroyed lives, you've destroyed the environment, and you've tarnished the mining community. So with those pieces, those are big, big elements of the job now. It's a new piece, but I think it's it's probably one of the most critical components of the job, ensuring we maintain that social license.
Yeah, I mean, well said, Mike. I don't have a lot to add. What I would say is that the pressure still exists to perform. I mean, make no mistake about it. The pressure, Mike feels it every day. Everybody at this table, everybody in this room feels it every single day. I think the scope of the job of the CEO has changed immensely, though, from the perspective that we've taken feedback. Companies have taken feedback from communities, whether we're talking about our partners in Indigenous groups or local communities or global communities. All of these things have impacted how we operate today in a positive way. I'm an environmentalist, absolutely. I'm not just a CEO. When I'm not at work, I love to fish. I love to enjoy natural resources. We don't keep fish. We like to catch them and make sure that we have clean water and clean air, and we can support all of the things that we all like to do. So it's very, very important. It's become extremely important to be good stewards of the environment. And I think most importantly, and we need to continue to emphasize this, but the financial community who spends the billions of dollars to invest in these operations is now accepting ESG, and they're not just accepting it. They're actually driving more challenging ESG standards. We feel this every day. So we still have a ways to go. There's still improvements that need to be made. Don't think it's done, but yes, the role of the CEO has changed and changed for the positive.
I can do nothing else but acknowledge that the older folks have wise words on our part. The role changed with the years, but it also changed from our perspective with the size of the company. You touched that a little bit, but the pressure and the number of things you need to take into account increase while you get bigger. We surely feel that. And well, the way our CEO has approached that is, well, he cannot be on top of everything. So the team has grown, and there's actually a lot of leadership that's shared. And one important thing when you do that is to have a clear vision or strategic alignment. And for Champion, that's really, we're iron ore pure play. So we're one focus is to be aligned with Mike said earlier, providing Scope 3 benefits for our clients by providing high grade iron ore. So I think that the management team is aligned onto that.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. So we'll get into a little bit more specifics here. And we are a residential community. We are a residential mine. More and more mining in the world has become fly in, fly out. I've been a part of it when I retired from here, or I'll call it pensioned out, not retired. When I left here and I went to work, I actually worked for Tata up in Shefferville, and I was flying in, flying out. It's a different form of mining. It's for the communities that are residential and the fear of that coming on track as you guys are looking for employees, or you're looking for a quick change in the way you do it. Recently, well, 10 years ago now, you went through an expansion at IOC, and many of the contractors that were here to build that, we knew it was a time frame. They were fly in, fly out. You had to prepare for that. Champion, it's a big part of your workforce now. I guess the question, and we'll start on the far end there, is with FIFO still a big part of the business needs, how do you plan to help give incentive to people to want to stay and become a part of the residential mining community rather than the fly in, fly out situation?
Yeah, that's a really good question, especially for us. We inherited the Bloom Lake operation that was doing fly in, fly out, and we had a lot of success in restarting the operation, but not that much into integrating residential workers in the Vermont area. And for CAMI, well, we're kind of at the same place, with the benefit of we're not executing the project yet. So we're really keen into being here today and tomorrow, and working with local authorities to find new ways to maybe implement the CAMI project a little bit differently than what Bloom Lake is today. But we don't, like today, we're not coming with a solution just yet.
Yeah.
But emphasizing, restating what I said at the beginning, that like that pre-feasibility work that's coming out in a few weeks, it's just the start of discussion at the end.
Thank you.
Yeah, listen, I'm probably the best one to speak about this at this table, because we've faced the most challenges in this specific area, because we've had to build a new workforce from scratch. And with that comes lots of opportunities and some challenges as well. So remember what I said in my opening statements: embrace change. First of all, we absolutely are committed to developing our people. We want to have as many of our people be residential workforce people that live in this community, that help this community grow and thrive. But with that, we also believe there has to be an element of fly in, fly out, so that we're introducing world-class business practices to our team. Right? If you never leave the area, and I talk about this with my children a lot of times. If you know me, I'll put this in the context of my children. I tell them when they get done with college, don't stay in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. Go to work in New York, go to work in Los Angeles, go to work in Dallas. I don't care. Go experience the world and then come back. And when you come back, you can bring these things to the local community and help that community advance itself. And this is exactly the philosophy that we're taking at Takora. We do have a small percentage of fly in, fly out workers. And our philosophy is to take these team members and to train our existing workers with world-class business practices. And we still have a long way to go, but we ultimately want our leaders at the Scully mine to be living in this community. That's the goal for Takora, but we also believe there's always going to be an element of fly in, fly out.
From IOC's perspective, we're super fortunate that we have a history of generations that are still coming up and working for our operations. We do have diversity in terms of different locations. We have people from different parts of Canada. We have folks from Australia, South Africa, Brazil, working and living in Lab West. So can you always say no to fly in, fly out? Absolutely not. We utilize fly in, fly out for contractors when we use spikes and shutdowns and these sort of things. But the viewpoint our organization is, to the extent that we can, we want to build that internally. And that's why this summit is actually so important. So you look, we have about 2,000 employees here in Lab West. And if we want to grow in the future, and hypothetically make up a number, you need 300 more people because you expanded or you did something. We need the solutions from this summit coming out in terms of how do we actually house them here? How do we ensure that there's enough teachers here? So this is why it's so important. Otherwise, the outcome of that, if you want economic prosperity here, it does turn into fly-in, which we don't want to do. So how do we come up with the solutions out of this summit? I'm looking forward to, what are the actionable items that come out of this summit? Like truly, what are we going to do together in terms of solving some of those issues? We can grow and get some efficiencies where, as people retire, we don't replace, but that's playing along the gray line. For us, if we really want to grow and expand our operations and maybe look at different components of it, and it requires additional resource in terms of people, what do we do with that? We want to tap also more into our Indigenous communities, and how do we allow them maybe to come in and go back into their communities? So we want to explore some of those things. We are on the traditional land, so how do we work with that? So I think the model of just saying, hey, let's grow the community is great, but we need to work together in terms of what those components are to make that happen.
That's fantastic. So you won't know me, Mike, from anybody. I worked with your business. I was a business improvement. I'm a Six Sigma black belt. And we had conferences every year with all the other mining business units within Rio Tinto. And one of the highlights for me was always benchmarking what the other businesses were doing. So I'm not going to say that there's any other community out there that does everything with all these issues well, but there's probably 100 mines involved with Rio Tinto. Is there an opportunity to say such and such area does something really well with transportation? Is there an area that does something really, really well with education? Is there something place that does, and we can benchmark from them rather than trying to figure it out here and turning over and over again what we've done in the past?
That's a good question. And, and I'm just thinking, I'm new to Rio Tinto. I spent 31 years with Vale before. Yeah. But I look at Rio Tinto's operation, you look at Diavik, it's fly in, fly out, the Pilbara's fly in, fly out. Like our big operations are mostly remote and our fly in, fly out operation. But you look at maybe a community like Thompson, Manitoba, that Vale had and grew from scratch in 1957. And it never became fly in, fly out. It's a vibrant community. It was at one point the second largest city in Manitoba. So are there things we can learn from that? Again, it takes partnerships and commitments, not just from industry, the municipal level, in terms of government and provincial level, and to some extent, maybe even federal, as we're global mining companies. So I think the solution for these things are not well, they did it this way over there, let's go implant it at Lab West. They're always going to be unique. And I think my hope is coming out of the summit, there's like a working group or something that comes up with all the knowledge that comes out in the conversation here and saying, okay, how do we put that into a framework that we can actually work on versus saying, well, that was a great summit, some great ideas, and we kind of all go off like we usually do. We all have busy jobs and saying, and then it kind of dissipates versus something really, some fabric framework comes out of it that we can actually work on.
Thank you. So, Walter, with the power side of things, there's sort of two ways of where we're looking at this. One is this huge lump of power we need to expand the mining industry of it. The other part of it is how do we take care of the community in terms of, say, we want to add 300 houses to the region, just to make the community a little bit more vibrant, a bit ability to make things a little bit more affordable. What are some of the upgrades to the system that we could see? What are some of the things we could see that could look after that smaller concern that might be a little bit faster and happening than what was mentioned before, the process in terms of going those big projects as years and years to get involved? What are some of the things that we could do to make the community more vibrant that way?
Well, I think they really go hand in hand. You know, obviously the big project that we're all talking about is the third line back to Churchill Falls, and we are planning to build that with enough capacity to meet all the mining needs that is ready and willing to sign up, and also at the same time to expand the access for the community, for the businesses, for the residential that's going to be required. So that's all part of the engineering of that new transmission system to ensure that that's there. I mean, to think about the expansion of the system in the absence of new power for mining seems like less likely, because, you know, this is either happening or it's not happening. And, you know, there's the optimism here makes me feel like this is happening, at least in some form. But there are other things that we can do. People have talked a lot at this conference about wind power as well. This is a fantastic region for wind, and we have been looking at that. And I believe that even with the new transmission line, you will see wind developed in this region. The resource is just too good. It works extremely well with hydro. You know, when wind is blowing, you know, it's contributing. You're able to sort of scale back on your water turbining, your hydro generation. And so you effectively store that wind energy in the reservoir. So the reservoir at Churchill Falls becomes essentially a big battery for the wind power. So that is something that we will see in almost any future scenario here. And that can be added, you know, bit by bit. But I think the key for us is to ensure that the new line or lines, however it ends up being, is constructed with adequate, you know, future looking estimates of what the need is going to be for the community, because we're in a different world. It's the load growth that we're seeing for even residential and industrial across the province and across Canada. It's not that slow line growth and kind of flat like it's been for the last 20 years. We're really about to hit that curve in the hockey stick. We're already seeing it. We hit a system peak last winter for the province that we had never seen before. Most jurisdictions are telling me the same thing. So, you know, everything is going electric, and we're going to see, you know, I would say most jurisdictions are looking at least a 50% increase in their load in the next couple of decades. So that's an unbelievable change from where we were, and we have to make sure that our infrastructure is based on where we're going. Like Wayne Gretzky always said, you don't go where the puck is, you go where the puck's going to be. And that's what we need to do here with this infrastructure.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to switch tacks a little bit here, and I'll ask the leaders this. Ever since I've been able to remember, there's been issues with transportation, issues with airfares, issue with flights and that. Maybe you can explain from your company's point of view how that affects your retention, how that affects your ability to bring new people in. How is that issue something that you have to face? Mike, we'll start with you. Yeah.
They're pretty big flight coming here. Yeah. So, you know, I think, you know, in terms of flying, I think there needs to be a level of reliability of access to Lab City. Like, we leave Montreal, it takes us four hours or so to get here, and then to go back. In terms of us, in terms of retaining our employees, it hasn't come up, in my view, as a big thing that's kind of bubbled in the top three that come up. There's always concern about the cost of flying in and flying out. But in terms of our retention, it hasn't been in our top priorities.
Yeah, listen, I think for us, it's kind of the opposite. We, you know, as a new mining company that has moved a tremendous amount of recruited and moved a bunch of people into this community. The isolation that exists here and the lack of efficient transportation, the ability to go places, is a big deal. And it has impacted our retention. We have relocated several team members into this region, and they have, in fact, left because they don't have access to efficient transportation. It's costly. They don't have family up here. So all the reasons that we all think about with our own families has been a critical issue for us. I often reflect all the places that I've worked in my life. I've traveled around a lot in my career, and I've worked a lot of different places. But this was unique when we made the investment here, made the acquisition of Scully. This is unique relative to the rest of the world. I've lived in Helsinki, Finland. I spent significant time in Germany, France, the United Kingdom, all over the United States, and I haven't seen this concept of fly in, fly out, probably because I'm in different industries. So I ask myself, what really is the issue, and how do we solve this, and why do people stay for long periods of time? And I think transportation is a big issue. The ability for, if we're going to relocate people, and if this growth happens, that's going to be a requirement. Mike can only take so many of my people. At the end of the day, we are going to have to relocate people into this region, and we have to find ways for them to acclimate and be able to exist here in a sustainable way. And transportation is going to play a big role. We have a couple of families that young engineers that have come here from the Philippines. They're fantastic employees. They're on 7 on, 7 off, and every single week they jump in their car and they drive to Montreal, because they're not used to being in an isolated community like this. That works for them. But imagine if we had the ability to make that more efficient and more cost effective. It would allow this community to grow. It would allow people to relocate here that aren't used to being in small communities and make it sustainable for them. And that's something that we're focused on.
And well, we'll mostly talk about the Quebec operation we have, but I'm picking up a little bit of both of you, because, well, since we mostly operate FIFO, our local people do have access to flights a little bit more easily than others. But as Mike said, the transportation is not number one into why people we're struggling to relocate. It's more relative to the vibrance of the community that you touched earlier. The access to housing is a bigger problem than transportation, I would say.
And again, I ask these questions because we're going to be talking about housing in a little bit. We're going to be talking about flights in a little bit. And I want to give you the opportunity to be on my spot and have those questions out there, because they directly affect how your business operates. So this is a chance for you to say, yeah, this is something that's an issue for us, or no, this is not the top of the food chain in terms of issues we want to fight. So again, we're talking about housing, similar type of question. What are some of the things that you guys would love to see happening here that would really help your businesses move forward? And we'll start on this time.
Yeah, so we're not experiencing in this community, in the Quebec side, it's really I'd say the absence of an open market. Let's say so somebody earlier was saying like the housing is not affordable here. In Vermont, I would say it's not existent, almost. So what we would like to see is yes, possibilities.
Yeah, obviously for us, it's a huge issue. Just everybody's talked about it. That's part of the reason that we're gathering here today, as Mike said, to find solutions. We want to come out of this with tangible action items to improve the community. A big issue for us is housing and access to affordable housing. Again, we have lost several employees at Tacora because of access to affordable housing. We've relocated people into this community. We've put them in rentals. We've put them in houses that we own. And at the end of the day, they're not able to find affordable housing, and they end up leaving. And it's not an insignificant thing for us, as well as we want our employees to enjoy all the things that we all enjoyed growing up. So if we can make the cost of housing more affordable, it's certainly going to provide everybody with a better way of life. It's going to increase the amount of people that we can bring into the region and permanently relocate here to develop this community. And it's a pillar of what we're striving for. When I started as the CEO in October of 2021, one of the very first things I did is we started an internal housing community. And we started looking at, as Takora, what can we do to improve the situation for our employees, to improve retention, to improve attraction, and all the things that we're all focused on. And we have lots of ideas, but those ideas are pretty expensive. So we have to find a way to partner and solve this problem because it's a big issue.
And maybe just to complete, because my eyes crossed clothes, it's a big issue in Vermont as well, but in the recent years, there has been many initiatives led by Claude and the team that are interesting avenues. So I'm plugging your panel tomorrow.
Kind of mind-boggling, you know, as a bit of an outsider coming into Lab West. And you know, I've been in the role now 2.5 years, and I think in my first 6 months or so, I went around and talked to developers in St. John's. Why aren't you guys building houses in Lab? Like, there's a supply and demand issue. So there's a huge amount of demand, lack of supply, prices are high. And the consistent message I got back was, wow, you know, the cycle, and there's layoffs, and well, we haven't had a layoff in 25 years. Like, what's going on in the psyche of developers in terms of looking at developing land? So I think there's a narrative that has to come out of this summit around, you know, we have a vibrant community. The mining companies are here for the long run. If you're looking, why are we building new subdivisions? If there's that much demand, why are we not building new subdivisions? Where's the barrier? Is the barrier in zoning? Is the barrier developers don't think they're going to make money? Where's the missing link? Because it absolutely does not make sense to me. And I think we need to get our message out that, you know, Lab West is here for long haul. We're a growing, vibrant community. The mining companies are in behind it. There is a lack of housing, and we need to look at what is the mixture of housing between apartments, between seniors, between new individual subdivisions. How does all like in? What's the development plan of Lab City? What's the development plan of Wabush? Have we set one up? Have we attracted people? So I think we really got to look at this, because within the economic sphere, it makes no sense at all.
Perfect. So now that's a good segue into, let's flip the group that's standing up here, and we'll bring the community leaders up and we can continue those conversations over. I want to really thank you. I can't remember a time when the leaders of the big mining industry are all sitting together having these types of conversations. I've been here, like I said, it's 50 years. I can't remember the last time I've seen everybody sitting here in a positive position wanting to have a good conversation. So thank you very, very much for being here. And we'll do that quick swap. The new panel will please come on up. Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's it. Right after this.
Yep.
Too much about this. If you just want to free flow from what we've already spoke about today.
Yep. All right. So we'll progress on to the next set of questions, and most of them will be just pushing those same questions from your points of view, and how are they the same or different from our leaders from the industry in the area. So Belinda, we talked a bit about the electricity needs here in the community. What's your thoughts on how that needs to progress for your community to grow?
Goes back to the all-encompassing, I think it's a great presentation. I appreciate that. The last 2 days has been a little bit overwhelming. Actually, I go from the heart's pounding to anxiety over if everybody gets it. I felt that everybody got it this time around. This morning, we're starting to get it. We're starting to pull it together when it comes to a team thing. So from that perspective for me, for the energy, it is huge. It's nice to get engaged and it's nice to hear the facts and be transparent about it. It doesn't happen enough sometimes, but I think it's happening here and I can already feel that more of that's going to be coming. I think Jennifer said something that was really important and it's, you know, it goes from here, we bring it down to here. And I think the idea of the summit is to from here to here, but it takes so long between the red tape and all that. So let's start removing that, some of these barriers with these type of groups and these types of actions. And one thing that hits me, and I got to say it before I forget it, because everybody knows who I am, good storyteller. Yesterday I discussed that I said the words even in my head 100 times again last night. It says, we're a town with a mind, or a mind with a town. A mind with a town. When I just heard Joe speak and Mike speak, I think the reason I've been repeating is because we're on that border of a town with a mind and a mind with a town. We've been a mind with a town, and we're no different than as a municipality or a government in treating it that way all these years. Because when we talk about FIFO and where it's going to end and what it's going to do, if we look at that piece, and I said it when I was out to M&L, and when I said it out loud to myself again last night, I was like, we're still that mind with the town, mind with the town, not a town with a mind. Because we don't grow and develop anything else here. We don't grow development. You just said it. We don't bring people in develop. Mike couldn't get anybody to come here because nobody looks beyond mining in Labrador City, a mine with a town. We don't look beyond it. We don't look beyond if we close down that we could have a college here, that we could have government buildings here. We don't have none of that here. Julian, I just heard, and good friend Paul Carter, welcome back to Labrador City, buddy. Born and raised here. Good to see you. But we got to get back off that curb of a mine with a town and a town with a mine. And that's what this summit is bringing to the forefront from that. We're right on that cusp. And if we don't build those partnerships to get us there and look to the development of the future, it won't happen. So really overwhelming for me to hear all the mining people speak. And Jennifer, it was wonderful because we're getting there and it's starting to go in the right direction on the development of it. And the same with the mining. It's good to hear about the wind. All that stuff is great for the community. So bring on the energy. I like it.
There was some good discussion earlier from Mike and Joe and Jerome, is it? Was it Jerome? Joel. No, but this is not new. This is something that we've been facing in this area for years. I'm looking down at Graham Leto, you know, the former mayor here, who wanted to bring power in this place 30 years ago. And here we are still talking about it. Government has dropped the ball big time on this for decades. You know, people advocating. We lost a smelter here one time because we couldn't get the power here. You know, we try to grow this area, but we're always stopped. Housing, the cost, that's what's killing people. People can't get mortgages because of the mortgage cost. That's why they're not getting the housing. And again, government dropped the ball. They sold off numerous Newfoundland and Labrador housing units here in the past. So that put a kibosh to our service industry workers that most of you guys are doing. They can't afford to get the mortgages and that type of housing here. So we got to do that. And you talked about forming a committee, Mike. I'm not sure where you're too. We had it. We had a task force, regional task force in this area that worked quite well. And our government took the person out of here that spearheaded that role. I know we started that ball getting it back again, and we need them at the table, the government, because we talk about partnerships. For years, I've been pushing for to do the same thing that we've done in Wawashire back in the 80s when Durham Flynn was the mayor. They put in subdivisions up here. Now, it took 30 years to get them developed. Hopefully that won't be the case, but if the partnerships that we can form, and Jordan, you've been part of these discussions, we need government to come in here, we'll do our part, but we need to build those developments, especially the infrastructure part of it, so we can say to the developer, come on in. Let's build some houses so we can keep every worker here, because I'm against fly in, fly 100%. Don't benefit my community. The corner store gets the cigarette sales and a few beer sales, but that's all we're getting, folks. We can't accept that no more. I understand there's I understand that, you know, during construction phases and stuff like that, you need that work, that the specific workforce. But when that's done, they're gone. But when I see people here all the time flying in, flying out year after year on a 2-week rotational basis, and what gets me, these are people that lived here, are now renting their house because they moved out to New Brunswick or Nova Scotia or wherever, and they're flying back and forth. It kills me to see it. And it should never be. So that's the kind of discussion we gotta have, especially with the provincial government and maybe our federal counterparts too, because they need to be at the table, COA, you know, whoever, to help these developments move forward so that we can build our communities, because that's what it's all about.
And like I've here. So my grandfather came here in 1959. Came up here before there was any houses or anything like that. He was back and forth numerous times, you know, economic ups and downs and stuff like that, and trying out different opportunities. My dad came back in the 80s and stayed. I'm here. I have 2 kids here. My wife's from Labrador. I'm not going anywhere. This is home. This is all I want. This is all I know. And this is what I appreciate. But to see that nothing has changed, and I actually had a conversation with my dad about it, to see how little development has happened since my dad landed back here in the 80s to this point now. How, you know, a couple streets, was it not even that, how little has actually changed and how done. He said the prosperity in that from 80s right up to today, we've been on a pretty high up, even with the closure of cliffs in 2014. If you look at Statistics Canada, we actually grew in population from that time. Even though we did have an economic lull, there was still enough prosperity in the community that it actually sustained the area for a while. And now we're on another up. Actually, I think one individual put it this way: we're on the edge of a new industrial revolution when it comes to how things are changing. And here we are in Lab West talking about the opportunities, green steel, all this, but we need people in Lab West. We need to draw them here. We need to bring them here. And yes, partially being lured by the economic opportunities of the green steel, about the changing of the industry and, you know, construction projects, you know, third line, manganese plants, expansions and stuff like that. These are things that will draw people, but you have to look at the social economic outcomes and how they have a positive and negative effect. So obviously, you know, and I agree with Ron. I don't believe fly in, fly out is the solution of Labrador West. We are a vibrant community, but we can be way more better. We can be way more productive. And you look at other opportunities. You look at Timmins, Thompson, Manitoba, all these places. You know, they're communities. But you know, some people think, oh, I think of Thompson, Manitoba. I don't think of it as, you know, a mining town. I agree with Mayor Adams. It's a town that happens to have a mine, and that's how we should be looking at Lab West. We are a vibrant community that can last generations. Like, you know, we're about to celebrate 70 years of continuous mining in the Labrador Trough. 70 years we've been doing this. And we have hundreds of years of iron ore in the ground left. And we all know that in any construction project, anyway, from now or even in the future, the building block of construction and economic engines is iron. You know, it's a part of humanity. So here we are now. We're kind of talking about the social economic influence, and that's what's going to lure people to stay here is that we have to have, a house that's affordable for a teacher, a house that's affordable for the social worker, the nurse, the lab tech. This is where we need everything. And I agree that we should have some sort of committee or beef up the task force that already exists, and actually do some work. And, I'm going to look at, IET and the department say, put some resources there for us and find out what is the best solution to these very complex problems. And we can't do it alone. We can't just study this alone. We need absolute help from everybody in this room to all pull together, from, IET, ACOA, the two municipalities, myself, that we can actually find and solve this problem. Because I want Lab West to be everything it can be and more. I want my girls to grow up in a place that they could say, you know what, Lab West is the best place in the world. Why go, why live elsewhere? They can go to university, do their thing, but I want them to look back and go, can't wait to get back to Lab West. And as crazy as that may sound to some, I actually had the opportunity to welcome back 5 of my closest friends who left here, who all moved back in the last 3 years because they went out somewhere and goes, God, I miss Lab West. I had a life, I had a work-life balance. I made great money. And you know what? 3 of them are all gone back to Rio Tinto, where their fathers worked. So the opportunity to draw back those that we lost to other opportunities is very real. So I do agree that, you know what? FIFO is not the answer. Working together and building a strong community, that's the answer.
You guys have been very loud and proponent. So I heard in the last panel, we talked about, let's take some action. I'm hearing from you guys that you're ready to take action. What I've heard here is forming a task force to look at these social economic issues that has the support that can make it strong. Is that, do I have a hand on my heart from everybody saying that that's the next step?
Well, that's already in work. It was already had one meeting. I was in the hospital at the time when the first one happened, but we have another one coming up in March. And that committee basically is all the mine players in the area,
Yep.
municipalities. Previously, we had a COA at the table. We had the provincial government minister sitting at the table with us all the time, and that's what we need back this time. My understanding at the first meeting that we had this time, government wasn't there. So those folks are crucial to be at the table, and our MHA should be there because he's the guy here in this town that can bring those issues to our government. But it can work. It worked well for years. You talk to people that were at those tables, at those meetings. We had some great discussions. I'm looking at a few faces that were sitting at those tables a few times. When we had trouble, we were able to get people come in and talk about, here's the issues we got. How can you help us? We've done that for a number of years, and then it just died because our government took it. So
I love this because I got everybody looking at me now. I want to speak. So Toby, go ahead.
Anyone who knows me, I've never had a paycheck. I've worked for myself since I was 17. I believe that we need to do these things ourselves. And so that's why I kind of I bristle a little bit at the idea of putting a room full of people who don't live and work here in a room and suggesting that those people who are going to move on in the future and don't really have skin in the game should be really making these decisions. I think this is I think as a community, we need to put together, call it what you want, an economic development corporation. I don't care what the name of it is, but I think it needs to have a workforce that's paid, that's only interest is in moving these issues forward. I think that they can certainly bring people into the room. But I think the way to solve this is with some kind of economic development corporation. I don't know what you call it, but I think that it needs to be focused. It needs to have a mandate. It needs to have a bill of work that it's got to do, and someone needs to be paid to do it, and specifically only that. I hear what Mayor Barron is saying, but I also don't see a lot of results over the last 25 years from the way we've been doing things, and I think we got to do it differently.
I guess for me and Mayor Barron, I didn't suggest that the task force didn't work. I heard great things on it actually, and same with the regional economic office, that we definitely got to advocate to get back. From a community perspective, I do believe, especially since I went mayor, we're not great at advocacy in Labrador West other than Facebook trolling, which gets us nowhere. So if I look up from the task force, I'm fortunate enough to have been at the task force when the Iron Ore Company of Canada had reached out and said, do we want to get this task force going with Decorah? Even the mayor from Fermat showed up and shared some good insight. From the task force, we're one of the steps forward. Again, a lot of brand new key players at the table. And from the task force, it was probably only days before that when Lydia and Toby had reached out and talked about this summit. So then we're saying, okay, are we overlapping from the summit to this? So we had that conversation. I went back to see Toby and them and said, okay, what's the summit mean? And what does the task force mean? And what it boiled down to is the summit was the part where we get everybody in the right room. And from that, we said, okay, maybe it's the summit that takes, and then the task force takes the action from it. So, and I think that's part of it, but that partnership then got to go to the next step. The reason we push hard on the summit, the reason we push hard on the task force, because we're in crisis now. We're beyond planning for 10 years out. We got to do immediate actions right away. So we said we have to have both. We have to have the summit. We have to have, and we have to have the task force continue after that. And it was agreed at that task force meeting that we'd see what come out of the summit, to see what our priority work was for the next level, and what community leaders had to be involved, what community businesses had to be involved, and who are the key stakeholders affected the most, and base it on risk. Everything in life is risk, whether we do the matrix wise or otherwise. We have to do it by risk. And excellent key points brought up by Mayor Barron on where we were and where we need to go. Excellent. We got to get back to some of it, but some of it we got to involve into better, bigger, and better. So that's where that evolved from, and that's where our next steps are. So do I think it's got to be a task force? I think the task force is key to this. I think the task force takes some of the actions away from this, but I still think people need to step up and say, hey, like, we're available. Tomorrow, I'm really looking forward to the mayor of, if you're thinking about not showing up tomorrow, tomorrow the mayor of Fairmont is going to talk about the housing up there and what that means, and we can learn from that. That's the point of the engagement. Going away and talking in silos is no good. Not having engagement sessions is no good. We got to hear from people. So these are good conversations. Even stuff I came from IRC, and to hear Mike and them talk about the DR pellet. 2006, I couldn't make a DR pellet in the pellet plant. It was so hard to make. I went back in 2019 as superintendent, and that's all they made. And I was like, this is so cool. To say we don't evolve, we do. Our manager at the time in the pellet plant would have shut down the flotation plant if he had his choice, because it was so hard to do. As Mike says, there's challenges. So get past the challenges, but we got to work together to get there. So the task forces, summit was a start. Task force is next. For me as mayor, I can only speak for me. No, I'm not going to just speak for me. I had a lot of conversations the last 2 days. Everybody feels the same way. So we have to get to the point where we got the summit, then we got the task force, and what does it look like beyond that? And open to all suggestions. Excellent conversations today. Thank you.
And I'll reiterate there too. I agree with Mayor Barron and Mayor Adams that, you know, it wasn't. I actually got to see the brief iteration before it was taken from us of the previous task force, and had great conversations with some of the people that were on it. And it was interesting. I was actually finally invited to it, and the day before it happened, the task force was dissolved. So that's how abruptly that it was closed. I think it needs to come back, and I think it needs to come back with more support. And I'm looking at the IRT again, that we have economic challenges because of our economic prosperity. We need to actually make sure that we have the ability to construct houses, to provide for our community, to actually help grow the mining industry. But hopefully, because people see what we're doing here, we can achieve that. We are, and I'll say it, I 100% agree with Mayor Adams' thing. We are not a mine with a town. We are communities that happen to have some mines around them. And I agree with that sentiment, because I love it here. I lived my entire life here, except 1 year in Goose Bay, but I brought my wife back with me. I'm raising my 2 children here. I love it. There's nothing more that I love more is my home in Labrador. And to see it in the way right now where we're struggling to house people, we're struggling with just the social determinants that we need, the things that actually make a community a community. So I put the challenge out that yes, 100%, I think this task force and supporting it in every way we can is great. And if this task force works the way it should, we should have some kind of economic person come out of it that actually is appointed or through the community to actually do what Toby's agreeing, because I think we can actually do both things in a way. We can use the task force as a mechanism to move towards this other thing where we can actually have someone sit down paid to actually help us write proposals, to write these things and to get through this. So I think we could do both in a way that is meaningful for the community, meaningful for the people in this room, because I honestly think there's not a single person in this room that don't agree that we could make Lab West the economic engine of this province and make it an envy for the rest of Atlantic Canada.
Sorry. No, I don't disagree. I think that, but I think that, I guess what I'm passionate about is that if we're gonna fix this, we need to have someone whose sole, maybe not someone, it may be an office of people whose sole role is to see us move forward and see these projects not sit on a shelf somewhere, but if we do need to lobby government, that we have someone who can lobby for whatever the solution might be and not be on the edge of someone's desk. And that's not to take away from anyone who's doing hard work. But a lot of the time when, when we do these things are done on the edge of someone's desk and they're second priority.
Well, thank you very much for that. It's much appreciated. Sorry, Gregor. There's a lot of passionate people up on the side of you here. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Ed, I am still that 8-year-old excited at Christmas. And it's really simple. This is a phenomenal opportunity. When you get the clear vision of what you want, whatever that is, and somebody puts that all together in one picture, everybody in this room, your job would be to communicate that to the rest of the world. And when you do that, it will attract, it will retain, it will make those things happen. Don't overcomplicate it. This is just drive it forward.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great.